In North Korea, there's a rule: when you betray the supreme leader, 3 generations of your family are erased. Not imprisoned, erased. So when word got out that I'd defected, Pyongyang didn't just panic, they lost their minds. Emergency broadcasts, international statements claiming I'd been kidnapped by southern puppets. The whole propaganda machine went into overdrive. Why? Because I wasn't just anyone. I was Ri Ejin, the face of state television for 7 years. The voice millions heard every night at 8 p.m. The woman they called the people's flower. And I didn't just slip away quietly in the night. I destroyed their carefully crafted illusion in broad daylight, in front of international cameras. Steps from the South Korean embassy in New York City. This is the story they don't want told. This is my story. I grew up in Kangsong, a coal mining town about 40 miles outside Pyongyang. If you've never heard of it, that's intentional. These places don't exist on official maps. They're dumping grounds for families the regime doesn't trust. My father's grandfather had fled to South Korea during the war. That single decision, made before my father was even born, marked our entire family as hostile class, politically contaminated, unreliable. We lived in a crumbling 2-room concrete box. No heating, no running water. In winter, when temperatures dropped to -20°C, we burned whatever we could find: old shoes, plastic bottles, textbooks. My father worked brutal 16-hour shifts down in the mines. Every morning before sunrise, I'd watch him disappear into that black hole in the ground. Some days, men didn't come back out. Cave-ins were routine. The state would call them martyrs, who sacrificed for the fatherland, hand the families a certificate, and that was it. 3 days of extra rice rations if you were lucky. I was 10 when my father didn't come home. Tunnel collapse, they said. Instant death, they said. We got the certificate. My mother held it and cried silently because crying too loudly could be interpreted as criticizing the state's safety standards. After that, everything got worse. My mother found work at a textile factory. But her rations were cut because we were now an incomplete revolutionary household. That's what they called families without men. My little brother Daniel was only 6. Every night he'd ask when Dad was coming back. I never told him the truth. How could I? Then came what the government officially called the arduous March, the famine years of the mid-90s. But there was nothing arduous about watching people starve to death in the streets. We survived on wild grass, tree bark, whatever we could steal or barter. I learned to trap rats in the alley behind our building. Let me tell you, roasted rat doesn't taste like chicken. It tastes like desperation and shame. I was 13 when I found my mother collapsed on our kitchen floor. Half-peeled potato still in her hand. The clinic said acute malnutrition and exhaustion. She died that night, squeezing my hand, whispering, "Take care of Daniel. Promise me." I promised. Suddenly Daniel and I were orphans with no relatives. Both sides of our family had been purged or scattered years earlier. The neighborhood party secretary suggested we go to a state orphanage. I knew what that meant. Those places were death camps with prettier names. Kids died from disease, abuse, starvation. I had to find another way. That's when I remembered something my mother once told me: if you have a talent the state wants, they'll feed you. The Pyongyang Arts Academy, an elite school that trained performers for state propaganda, held auditions once a year. I could sing. My mother had taught me traditional Korean folk songs before she died. So I decided to try. The audition was held in a freezing gymnasium in central Pyongyang. Hundreds of girls lined up, most from powerful party families with connections. I wore my only dress, patched and threadbare. Daniel sat in the back row, watching with these huge, hopeful eyes. When they called my name, I walked to the center of the floor and sang a revolutionary anthem about loyalty to the supreme leader. My voice cracked at first. I was terrified. But then I thought about Daniel, about the promise I'd made my mother, and I sang like our lives depended on it. Because they did. 3 stone-faced judges sat at a table in their military uniforms. When I finished, there was this awful silence. Then one of them, a woman with these sharp, calculating eyes, said, "Tone needs work. Posture is weak. But your emotional delivery is acceptable." 2 weeks later, the letter came. I'd been accepted. The academy wasn't a school, it was a factory. A factory that mass-produced perfect propaganda machines. We woke at 5 a.m. every single day. Physical training, vocal drills, ideology classes, performance rehearsals. Everything was designed around one goal: serving the party, glorifying the supreme leader. Demonizing the American imperialists and their South Korean puppets. Show weakness, you got punished. Question anything, you disappeared. But we were fed real rice, not sawdust mixed with grain. Sometimes actual meat. After years of eating grass and bark and rats, that alone made it worthwhile. Daniel got placed in a state boarding school, a privilege because of my new status. I saw him once a month. Each time, he looked healthier, happier. That made everything bearable. I trained for 3 brutal years. Singing, dancing, public speaking, broadcast journalism. They taught us how to smile without feeling anything, how to read scripts with manufactured enthusiasm, how to embody the party's will without thinking. By 16, I was performing at major state events. By 18, I was auditioning for Korean Central Television. By 19, I became the youngest primetime news anchor in North Korean history. I had become exactly what they wanted. But here's the thing about flowers in North Korea: they don't bloom free. They bloom in chains. Being famous in North Korea isn't like being famous anywhere else. You don't get freedom. You get a prettier cage with better locks. I lived in a state-assigned apartment that was bugged from floor to ceiling. Every phone call recorded. Every movement tracked. Every friend I made either turned out to be an informant or mysteriously vanished without explanation. And then there were the requests. High-ranking party officials started inviting me to private dinners. At first, I thought it was networking, professional relationship building. Then I understood what they really wanted. These men saw me as property, a trophy, something they were entitled to because of their rank. Refusing wasn't an option, not if I wanted Daniel to stay safe. Vice Minister Choi made it crystal clear one night: your brother's scholarship continuation depends entirely on your cooperation. This was my life. Glamorous on camera, suffocating behind closed doors. Every night I read scripts, celebrating the greatness of our system while living in constant fear. I smiled for millions while slowly dying inside. Then one Tuesday morning, 2 men in plain clothes walked into the studio during rehearsal. State security. Everyone froze. Ri Ejin, come with us. Now. They took me to an unmarked gray building and showed me photographs. Daniel, walking to class, eating lunch, talking with friends. Every moment of his day captured and catalogued. Your brother's doing very well, one agent said coldly. It would be tragic if something happened to him. They knew. Somehow they knew I'd been wavering, that I'd been quietly questioning things in my head. Maybe I'd hesitated a fraction too long reading a script. Maybe my smile hadn't been quite enthusiastic enough at some party event. In a total surveillance state, the smallest deviation gets noticed. Vice Minister Choi is very disappointed in your recent attitude. The other agent continued. He's been an excellent patron to you. You need to show more appreciation. You have a simple choice, the first agent said flatly. Continue serving the party with proper enthusiasm, or we reassign your brother to a rural labor camp for re-education. Do you understand? I understood perfectly. I nodded, went back to the studio, and read that night's broadcast with a flawless smile plastered across my face. But inside, something fundamental had broken. I couldn't do this anymore. Not even for Daniel's safety. That night, I made a decision. For months after that, I saw absolutely no way out. North Korean television personalities never travel abroad. We're too valuable, too risky to let loose. The regime keeps its propaganda tools on the shortest possible leash. Then, out of nowhere, everything shifted. In June, the regime announced they were sending a special overseas press delegation to New York for some UN cultural exchange program. North Korea wanted to showcase its artistic achievements to the international community. They needed their best, most photogenic faces. My name was on the list. For about 5 seconds, I felt pure hope flooding through me. Then came the terror. Because they also announced the security protocols. Each delegate would have 2 state security agents assigned to them personally. And all family members would remain in Pyongyang as assurance of loyalty. Any defection attempts would result in immediate and severe retaliation. against whoever got left behind. Daniel couldn't come. That was the entire point of the system. After the meeting, senior agent Kim, this guy who'd been shadowing me for years, pulled me aside. He had this cold, reptilian smile. "I know exactly what you're thinking, Comrade Maya. Don't even consider it. Your brother's continued well-being depends entirely on your loyalty. Remember that every single moment you're abroad." I smiled back sweetly. "Of course, comrade. I live to serve the fatherland." But my mind was already racing. There had to be some way. There had to be. 2 weeks before departure, I got a message slipped to me by an old classmate from the academy, someone I trusted, someone who'd shown subtle signs of doubting the regime over the years. The message was brief: "Be ready. New York. Help is possible." I had no idea who was offering help or how they'd gotten word to me. But it was a lifeline. I had to grab it. The problem was still Daniel. They'd never let him travel with the press delegation. And if I defected without him, they'd punish him immediately and brutally. Then fate intervened in the strangest possible way. Vice Minister Choi, the same bastard who'd been pressuring and threatening me, invited me to another one of his private dinners. This time he got drunk, started boasting about his influence and connections. At one point, he mentioned that the regime was also selecting a youth delegation for the same UN event, handpicked students to showcase North Korean educational excellence. "Your brother's school is being considered for representatives," he slurred. Smart boy. Excellent revolutionary spirit. An idea sparked in my head. A desperate, dangerous idea. I smiled sweetly and poured him another drink. "Vice Minister, you're so insightful. If Daniel were selected, it would reflect incredibly well on your personal mentorship of our family. People would see how your guidance has shaped both of us to better serve the party." Appealing to his massive ego and his constant need for credit worked perfectly. Within 3 days, Daniel's name appeared on the official youth delegation roster. We'd both be in New York together. For the first time in months, I let myself feel something like hope. Landing at JFK Airport felt like stepping into a completely different universe. The brightness, the space, the complete absence of propaganda posters plastered every 10 feet. Our security handlers kept us in tight formation, but I could still catch glimpses through the bus windows. People of every color and background just walking around freely. No mandatory uniforms, no organized marching formations, nobody checking papers or monitoring behavior. Restaurants, shops, advertisements. Everywhere capitalism's supposedly corrupt chaos. But it didn't look like suffering or moral decay. It looked like life. Real life. They housed us in a hotel in Midtown Manhattan. Daniel's youth delegation was on a different floor under separate security. I barely saw him the first 2 days. It was agony. On day 3, during a cultural performance we were giving at the UN building, something extraordinary happened. I noticed this man in the audience, Korean features, American press credentials hanging around his neck, watching me with this intense, focused expression. Not admiration or curiosity, recognition, and something else. Concern, maybe even anger on my behalf. After the performance ended, while our handlers were distracted talking to diplomats, this journalist approached a colleague standing near me and spoke in Korean, loud enough for me to clearly overhear. "She's been reading regime propaganda for 7 years straight. Does she even know what she's really saying? Does she have any idea what's actually happening in those camps?" It was completely deliberate. He wanted me to hear it. That evening, I found a note that had been slipped under my hotel room door. Written in English, which I'd secretly studied whenever possible. "Your brother is being threatened by security agents. I personally witnessed it yesterday at the youth delegation event. I'm a journalist. I have contacts. I can help you both. But you must act fast. Tomorrow at the NGO reception, 3 p.m. I'll be wearing a blue tie. If you want help, spill water near me, make it look accidental. We'll have exactly 1 chance." That's it. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold the paper. This was it. The lifeline I'd been desperately praying for. But it could also be a trap. A loyalty test set up by state security. If I responded and it turned out to be fake, Daniel and I would both be dragged back to Pyongyang and publicly executed. I had to decide right then: trust a complete stranger with our lives, or go back to North Korea and live in chains forever. I burned the note in the bathroom sink and flushed the ashes down the toilet. The next day, I wore my red dress, the one that meant I was ready to risk everything. The NGO cultural reception was held in a crowded hotel ballroom in Manhattan. Diplomats, journalists, activists, all mingling together. Our North Korean delegation stood clustered in one corner, with 6 security agents watching our every breath and movement. Daniel's group was there, 215 students in identical uniforms, mechanically reciting practiced lines about the superiority of our socialist education system. I managed to catch his eye once. He looked exhausted, scared. Then I saw him, the journalist, blue tie, exactly like he'd said, standing casually near the refreshment table, pretending to check messages on his phone. This was the moment, now or never. My handler, Agent Kim, was standing maybe 3 feet away, watching everything with those cold, calculating eyes. I needed a distraction, something that would look completely natural and accidental. I grabbed a glass of water and walked toward the Swedish diplomat, who'd been asking technical questions about our broadcast systems. As I approached him, I deliberately caught my heel on the carpet edge and stumbled forward. The water went flying. It splashed all over the journalist's shoes and the bottom of his pants. "Oh my God, I'm so sorry," I gasped in English, immediately rushing forward with napkins, making a big show of apologizing profusely. He smiled calmly, waving it off. "It's completely fine. Accidents happen all the time." As I bent down, dabbing at the water, pooling on the floor, he whispered in rapid-fire Korean, barely moving his lips. "Tomorrow, South Korean Embassy public event at Rockefeller Center. 2 p.m. Major Hollywood celebrity making surprise appearance. Total chaos guaranteed. Security will be completely overwhelmed. Bring your brother. When I give the signal, you run like hell. North side of the plaza, glass doors with Korean flag. Run and don't look back. You'll have maybe 30 seconds. That's it." Then, louder in English for everyone around to hear, "Really, it's okay. No harm done at all." Agent Kim appeared instantly at my elbow. "Comrade Maya, we should return to our delegation group now." I apologized one more time, bowed respectfully, and walked away. My heart was pounding so violently I was sure he could hear it. That night, I managed to find Daniel alone for just a few seconds in the hotel corridor. Both of us pretending to use the vending machines. "Tomorrow we're going to a public event," I whispered in Korean, feeding coins into the machine without looking at him. "Stay as close to me as physically possible. When I suddenly grab your hand and start running, don't ask any questions. Don't hesitate even for a second. Just run as fast as you can. Do you understand me?" His eyes went huge. "Are we actually?" "Don't say it out loud. Just trust me completely. Can you do that?" He swallowed hard and nodded, grabbed his soda and walked away. I didn't sleep at all that night. Just lay there in the dark, mentally rehearsing every possible scenario. What if the journalist was lying? What if it was an elaborate trap? What if we got caught? But I also thought about what was waiting for us back in Pyongyang. More threats, more control, more nights in Vice Minister Choi's apartment. Daniel eventually being forced into the same crushing system. That had destroyed me. No, we had to try, even if it killed us. The Rockefeller Center event was billed as some generic cultural celebration of international cooperation and peace. In reality, it was just a photo opportunity for various countries to pretend they got along. Our delegation arrived at exactly 1:45 p.m. Daniel's group came separately at 1:50. Security was tight but clearly stretched thin. Too many moving parts, too many VIP delegations, too many cameras. I positioned myself as close to Daniel's group as I could manage without being obvious. Agent Kim was watching, but he was also distracted, trying to coordinate with the other security personnel. At 2:10 p.m., the announcement came over the loudspeakers. Emma Stone was making an unscheduled surprise appearance to promote her new film about international cooperation. The crowd absolutely erupted. People surged forward. Cameras started flashing everywhere. Security guards scrambled, trying to control the sudden chaos. I saw the journalist immediately. Blue tie, standing near the north edge of the plaza. He caught my eye and gave the smallest possible nod toward the South Korean embassy building. This was it. I grabbed Daniel's hand hard. Now. Move right now. We threw ourselves into the crowd, pushing between tourists and journalists and activists. Behind us, I heard Agent Kim's voice cut through the noise. Ri Ejin, stop immediately. But we didn't stop. We couldn't stop. The crowd became our shield, our camouflage. Bodies pressed in on all sides. Camera flashes created these disorienting bursts of light. Don't let go of my hand. I screamed at Daniel. We ran, pushed, shoved, dodged. The glass doors with the South Korean flag were getting closer. 50 feet, 40, 30. Someone grabbed my shoulder from behind. A security guard, but not one of ours. Wait, you can't just. We're seeking asylum. I screamed at the top of my lungs in English, loud enough for everyone around to hear. South Korean embassy. We're from North Korea. If they take US back, they'll kill US. Suddenly the journalist was there with his camera up, filming everything. Are you defecting right now? He shouted in Korean, making sure it was on video. Say it clearly. State your names. Yes, we're defecting right now, I screamed, still dragging Daniel forward. My name is Ri Ejin. This is my brother Daniel. We're from North Korea. We're asking for political asylum. South Korean embassy security guards came rushing out. They grabbed us, pulled us bodily through the glass doors. We tumbled inside. The doors slammed shut and locked. Agent Kim and 2 other North Korean security personnel reached the entrance literally seconds later, screaming threats and demands in Korean. But they couldn't cross that threshold. The embassy was South Korean sovereign territory. We were beyond their reach now. We were free. Inside the embassy, I completely collapsed. My legs just gave out. Daniel was sobbing. I was shaking so violently I couldn't stand up. A South Korean diplomat, this woman, maybe in her 40s with kind eyes, knelt down beside me. You're safe now, she said gently in Korean. Can you hear me? You're safe here. Nobody can hurt you. I nodded, tears just streaming down my face, unable to form words. They took us to a secure room inside the embassy. Comfortable chairs, bottles of water, actual food, rice, soup, vegetables. Real food. I couldn't eat anything. My stomach was twisted into knots so tight I thought I'd vomit. Outside, we could hear North Korean officials shouting, making demands, threatening diplomatic incidents. The South Korean embassy remained absolutely firm. We'd entered voluntarily, we'd declared asylum on camera in front of witnesses. And we were under their protection now. That night, the video went viral. My face, screaming for freedom in the middle of Rockefeller Center, became international news within hours. The interview and verification process started immediately. South Korean intelligence needed to confirm we were really who we claimed and not planted spies. 3 different officials questioned me for hours and hours. Why exactly did you decide to defect? What specific information do you have about North Korean military capabilities? Have you been coerced or manipulated by South Korean or American agents? I answered every single question as honestly as I could. I was physically and emotionally exhausted, terrified about what came next, but also weirdly, surprisingly relieved. For the first time in my entire adult life, I was telling the actual truth. Not reading carefully vetted scripts. Not performing for cameras, just speaking my truth. 10 days later, after intensive negotiations between US, South Korean, and various international organizations, Daniel and I boarded a private plane to Seoul. Landing at Incheon Airport was completely overwhelming. The brightness, the cleanliness, the order, people moving freely, going about their lives without visible fear. A team from the National Intelligence Service met us immediately and took us to a secure debriefing facility outside the city. For the next 3 months, we went through intensive questioning, comprehensive psychological evaluation, and structured resettlement training. They had to make absolutely certain we weren't North Korean intelligence plants. They also had to help us begin processing and understanding the world we'd just entered. Daniel really struggled at first. He'd been indoctrinated since early childhood. Everything he'd ever been taught, everything he thought he knew about the world, all of it was lies. Processing that reality completely broke something inside him temporarily. He stopped eating, stopped talking, just sat and stared at walls for hours. But slowly, with professional therapy and time and patience, he started coming back. I struggled too, but differently. I felt crushing guilt. Guilt for all the propaganda I'd spread to millions of people. Guilt for the people still trapped back there. Guilt for somehow surviving when so many others didn't and never would. But I also felt something I'd genuinely never experienced before. In my life, real hope. 6 months after arriving in South Korea, I was invited to testify at the United Nations Human Rights Council in Geneva. I almost said no. The thought of speaking publicly terrified me. It meant becoming a permanent target, painting a target on my back forever. But then I thought about all the people still trapped in North Korea, still reading lies, still living in that suffocating fear, still believing the propaganda. Someone had to speak for them. Someone who'd been inside the system. So I went. Standing at that podium in Geneva, looking out at representatives from dozens and dozens of countries. I felt my voice start shaking. But I spoke anyway. My name is Ri Ejin. For 7 years, I was the voice of North Korean state propaganda. I read beautiful lies about the greatness of our system, while people literally starved to death in the streets. I praised our leaders while children died in political prison camps. I smiled for cameras while my own brother was being threatened, and my soul was being destroyed. Today, I'm here to tell you the actual truth. North Korea isn't the workers' paradise they claim it is. It's a prison, and 25 million people are trapped inside with no way out. I don't expect you to magically save them all. I don't even know if that's possible. But I need you to know they exist. I need their suffering to be seen and acknowledged and not ignored. The speech went viral online. I became a regular spokesperson for various North Korean human rights organizations. It gave my escape actual meaning and purpose. Daniel chose a completely different path forward. He wanted distance from politics and public attention. He got accepted to KAIST, one of South Korea's most prestigious technical universities. Studied like crazy. By his mid-20s, he was working as a research engineer at a major tech company, developing AI algorithms and machine learning systems. He rarely talked about North Korea, never gave interviews or public statements. He just wanted to build something resembling a normal life. I completely respected that. We'd escaped together, but we didn't have to heal the same way. He met a woman, a South Korean engineer. They fell in love, got married quietly in a small ceremony with just a handful of close friends. And that made absolutely everything worth it. By 2023, I'd been living in South Korea for 5 years. I'd testified dozens and dozens of times, written a memoir that got published internationally, worked extensively with journalists and activists around the world. I was completely exhausted, and I realized something. I'd spent my entire life being watched. In North Korea by the regime. In South Korea by security services protecting me from assassins. I just wanted to live. Quietly, safely, normally. So Daniel and I made a decision together: relocate to a third country. Somewhere with much less Korean peninsula politics. Somewhere we could finally be somewhat anonymous. Daniel lives just 2 blocks away with his wife and their baby daughter, my niece Hannah. She'll never know the fear and surveillance and control we experienced. She'll grow up completely free. Last month, we took Hannah to a park along the Oslo fjord. She's just learning to walk, stumbling, falling, laughing that pure baby laugh. Daniel held her tiny hands while she took wobbly steps. I'm just Maya, a woman who survived hell. A woman who speaks truth when people ask. A woman who now lives quietly and peacefully in a small Norwegian city, drinking good coffee and reading books and watching her niece learn to walk. And maybe that's the greatest possible defiance of all, choosing an ordinary, peaceful, private life when they wanted to make me extraordinary, and controlled and public forever. I am free.